Black woman accused of trespassing on private jet. She's the CEO and fires them in minutes. How would you handle being underestimated? What would you do to stand up for fairness and reclaim your power? Today we dive into an inspiring real-life story that will leave you speechless and motivated to confront the challenges in your own life. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments. If you love stories about courage, perseverance, and standing up for what's right, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Your support helps us bring impactful stories like this to even more people. Let's get started. The private jet terminal exuded an air of understated luxury. The warm glow of a polished chandelier reflected off sleek marble floors, and the soft hum of distant jet engines blended seamlessly with the low murmur of well-dressed travelers. Occasionally, the quiet was punctuated by the gentle clatter of luggage wheels, creating a serene yet bustling ambience. Amid this elegance, Alexis Moore stepped out of her sleek black sedan, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. Heads turned as she entered, not because of her striking beauty, though she possessed it in spades, but because of her undeniable confidence. Dressed in tailored slacks and a crisp white blouse, she carried herself with a poise that left no room for doubt she belonged here. Her designer handbag rested lightly in the crook of her arm, understated yet clearly expensive. But it wasn't her style or accessories that drew the whispers. The moment Alexis entered, quiet murmurs began to ripple among the staff. Near the reception desk, two ground crew members exchanged hushed comments. "Who's that?" one asked, his tone tinged with curiosity. "No idea," the other replied, a note of skepticism in his voice. "Doesn't look like our usual clientele." Alexis caught their glances out of the corner of her eye but didn't react. She was used to it, the assumptions, the scrutiny, the questions that followed her wherever she went. She wasn't here for their approval. Without hesitation, she walked to the reception desk, her calm authority commanding attention in a way words never could. Yet, the whispers persisted, louder now among the onlookers. Some were curious, others were openly judgmental. But Alexis didn't falter. She had dealt with this before, and she would handle it the same way she always had, with quiet strength and undeniable resolve. Alexis approached the sleek reception desk, where a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a professional smile greeted her. "Good afternoon, ma'am. May I help you?" "Yes," Alexis replied, her voice calm and steady. "I'm here for the Eclipse jet on the East Tarmac." The receptionist's smile faltered for a brief second, her eyes quickly scanning Alexis's attire and composure. It was a look Alexis had encountered many times before, a silent assessment of whether she could truly belong here. Regaining her professional demeanor, the receptionist typed on her keyboard and asked, "Do you have a reservation?" Alexis allowed a small, confident smile to touch her lips. "I don't need one," she said calmly. "It's my jet." The receptionist froze mid-typing, her polite mask cracking to reveal surprise. "Your jet," she repeated, her tone laced with skepticism. "That's correct," Alexis confirmed, her gaze unwavering. Before the receptionist could respond, heavy boots stomped across the marble floor, interrupting the exchange. Hendrik, the head of ground operations, approached with a brisk, authoritative stride. His fluorescent safety vest caught the light, and his weathered face bore a scowl that deepened as his eyes swept over Alexis. "Is there a problem here?" he asked gruffly, directing his attention to the receptionist. "She's claiming the Eclipse jet is hers," the receptionist explained cautiously. Hendrik turned his full attention to Alexis, his gaze lingering a little too long on her composed elegance. His expression darkened, a mix of disbelief and disdain. "That's a private jet," he said bluntly. "You can't just walk in here and claim it's yours." Alexis didn't flinch. Her smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet determination. "I'm not claiming anything," she said firmly. "It is mine." Hendrik scoffed and crossed his arms. "Listen, lady. I don't know how you got in here, but this isn't some commercial airline where you can sneak onto a flight. If you don't leave voluntarily, I'll have security escort you out." By now, the terminal had fallen into an uneasy silence. Staff and passengers alike turned their attention to the escalating scene, whispering among themselves. "She doesn't look like she belongs here," someone murmured. "Maybe she's lost," another suggested. Alexis stood her ground, her posture straight and her gaze unwavering. Do you always treat your clients this way? She asked, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. You're not a client, Hendrik snapped back. You're trespassing. At that moment, 2 security guards arrived at Hendrik's signal. One, a tall man with a clipboard, approached cautiously. Ma'am, we're going to need you to step aside and provide some identification, he said, his tone firm but measured. Alexis reached into her handbag, her movements deliberate. Instead of producing identification, she pulled out her phone. I don't think that will be necessary, she said, dialing a number with practiced ease. What do you think you're doing? Hendrik demanded, his voice rising. Alexis didn't answer. The room seemed to hold its breath as she waited for the call to connect. Onlookers whispered and stared, their curiosity now mixed with confusion. Moments later, the terminal doors swung open, and Jason, Alexis's executive assistant, entered. Dressed impeccably in a tailored navy blazer and carrying a slim leather folder, his presence exuded authority. He moved with calm precision, his gaze locking onto Alexis as she gave him a small nod. Jason turned to Hendrik, his voice even and composed. I'm here on behalf of Ms. Alexis Moore, he said, CEO of Eclipse Aviation. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Hendrik's scowl faltered, his bravado crumbling as the weight of the situation hit him. He looked around the room, visibly uncomfortable as whispers turned to stunned silence. Is it so hard to believe, Alexis said, her voice low but laced with power, that someone like me could own not just the jet, but the very terminal you're standing in? Hendrik swallowed hard, his face pale. I didn't know, he stammered. There must have been some kind of misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Alexis repeated, her tone sharp. You didn't even give me the courtesy of listening. Instead, you made assumptions, and those assumptions have consequences. Turning to Jason, she gave a curt nod. Make sure everything is handled appropriately, she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. With that, Alexis walked past Hendrik and the security guards, her steps steady and unhurried. The crowd parted for her like royalty, their expressions a mix of awe and embarrassment. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The storm she had unleashed was only just beginning. As the tension in the terminal reached its peak, Alexis Moore remained calm, her fingers deftly navigating her phone. A quick call, followed by a composed instruction, was all it took. She didn't raise her voice or plead for understanding. She simply made it clear that she was about to turn the situation on its head. Jason, she said into the phone, her tone steady. I need you here now. Bring the folder. Minutes later, the heavy glass doors of the terminal swung open, and Jason entered with a presence that instantly commanded attention. Dressed in a sharp navy blazer and carrying a slim leather folder, he moved with quiet authority. His expression was calm, professional, and utterly unbothered by the escalating chaos. Jason walked directly to Alexis, offering her a slight nod before turning his focus to Hendrik. Without so much as a hint of hesitation, he addressed the head of operations. I'm Jason Cole, he said evenly, executive assistant to Ms. E. Alexis Moore, CEO of Eclipse Aviation. The room went still, the weight of his words settling over the crowd. Hendrik's bravado faltered, his arms uncrossing as his scowl turned to confusion and unease. CEO, he repeated, almost incredulous. Yes, Alexis interjected, stepping forward with a calm but commanding presence. CEO and owner. I don't just own the jet, I own this terminal. Now let's talk about how you've treated me today. Hendrik's face flushed with embarrassment, his posture visibly shrinking. I didn't realize, he stammered. And that's the problem, Alexis said firmly, her voice sharp and precise. You didn't take a moment to consider the possibility. You made assumptions that were not only wrong but unprofessional and disrespectful. Jason opened the leather folder he had brought, producing documents that confirmed Alexis's ownership of the jet in the terminal. He placed them on the reception desk, allowing everyone, including the stunned receptionist, to see the undeniable truth. The murmurs that had filled the terminal moments earlier were replaced by an awkward silence. Staff members exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to react. Passengers looked on with a mixture of shock and intrigue, realizing the magnitude of the mistake they had just witnessed. Alexis didn't let the silence linger. I hold my staff to high standards, she said, addressing not just Hendrik but everyone within earshot. I built Eclipse Aviation on principles of respect, professionalism, and inclusion. What I've experienced here today is a complete failure to uphold those values." Hendrik opened his mouth to respond, but Alexis raised a hand, cutting him off. "Don't apologize," she said. "It's too late for that. Actions have consequences, and this is no exception." Turning to Jason, she gave a single nod. He addressed Hendrik directly, his tone firm but professional. "As of this moment, you are relieved of your duties. You will receive a formal letter detailing the terms of your termination." Hendrik's face turned pale, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. But nothing came. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Alexis stepped past him, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. "Let this be a lesson," she said, her voice echoing through the terminal. "Never underestimate someone because of your assumptions. It will cost you more than you think." With that, Alexis walked to her jet, her posture unwavering and her authority undeniable. The staff, passengers, and even security parted for her without hesitation, their respect earned in a way they would not soon forget. Jason stayed behind for a moment, ensuring all the paperwork and protocols were handled before following her. The moment was more than just a personal victory for Alexis. It was a turning point for everyone who witnessed it. The message was clear. Respect is non-negotiable, and leadership comes from standing firm in the face of injustice. The silence in the terminal was deafening. Everyone, staff and passengers alike, had stopped in their tracks, their eyes glued to Alexis Moore. Moments earlier, she had exposed the assumptions and disrespect that had led to this confrontation. Now, it was time to act. Hendrik, still reeling from the revelation of Alexis's status as own owner, stood frozen, his bravado reduced to a faint shadow of itself. His attempts to form words were futile. His scowl, once a display of authority, had been replaced with a pale, stunned expression. "I didn't mean any disrespect," he stammered finally, his voice cracking under the pressure. Alexis turned to him, her composure steady and unshaken. "Disrespect wasn't your intention?" she asked, her voice calm but cutting. "Then what was your intention when you dismissed me without even hearing what I had to say? When you assumed I didn't belong here because of how I look?" Hendrik swallowed hard, unable to meet her gaze. The tension in the air was almost tangible, every eye in the terminal fixed on the unfolding moment. "You see," Alexis continued, her voice now addressing the room as much as Hendrik, "this isn't just about me. This is about a culture of assumptions, a culture where people are judged before they're given a chance to prove themselves." She turned back to Hendrik, "And that culture starts with leadership. When leadership fails, the entire organization suffers." Jason stepped forward, his professionalism unwavering. "As of this moment, Hendrik, you are relieved of your duties. You will receive a formal letter detailing the terms of your termination," he said, his voice firm but measured. The words landed like a thunderclap. A ripple of shock passed through the room as staff exchanged wide-eyed glances. The receptionist, who had been quietly observing from her desk, looked down at her hands, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Even the security guards, who had moments earlier stood ready to escort Alexis out, shifted uneasily on their feet. Hendrik opened his mouth, desperation now coloring his tone. "You're firing me after all these years?" Jason's expression remained neutral. "After all these years, you should have known better," he replied. "This decision comes directly from Ms. Moore." Hendrik's face fell, his defiance completely shattered. He turned to Alexis as if hoping for leniency, but her expression made it clear there would be none. "This isn't personal," Alexis said firmly. "This is about accountability. Your actions today were unprofessional, disrespectful, and completely out of line. You failed to represent the values this company stands for, and that failure has consequences." With that, Alexis stepped past him, her posture tall and her steps purposeful. The crowd parted for her as she made her way toward the door leading to the tarmac. The quiet murmurs of disbelief from the staff and passengers followed her, but Alexis didn't look back. She didn't need to. The heavy door to the tarmac groaned open, and Alexis was met by her pilot, who greeted her with a respectful nod. "Ms. Moore," he said, his voice steady, "the Eclipse jet is ready for departure whenever you are." "Thank you," Alexis replied, offering him a faint smile. "Please ensure everything is in perfect order. I'll be boarding shortly." As she ascended the jet's stairs, She paused at the top, taking one last look at the terminal below. The staff inside had begun to scatter, their movements hurried and uncertain. She knew the weight of the moment would linger with them, an unmistakable reminder that their actions, or inactions, carried real consequences. Inside the jet, Alexis took her seat, exhaling softly. She felt no satisfaction in Hendrik's downfall, but also no regret. His behavior had demanded action, and she had delivered it with the same integrity that had guided her entire career. As the engines roared to life, Alexis leaned back in her seat and closed her eyes. She wasn't angry anymore. What she felt now was resolve. This wasn't just about addressing one man's behavior. It was about setting an example, ensuring that no one else in her organization would ever face the same assumptions and disrespect she had endured today. Back in the terminal, the staff remained subdued. The receptionist, who had been at the forefront of the initial interaction, stood silently at her desk, her mind replaying every detail of the confrontation. The lesson Alexis had delivered was one they would all carry forward. For Alexis, the day had been exhausting, but it was also a pivotal moment, a reminder of the importance of standing up for what was right and leading with strength, dignity, and grace. Just as the jet ascended into the sky, Alexis Moore gazed out of the window, watching the terminal shrink into the distance. The hum of the engines was steady and calming, a sharp contrast to the turbulence she had faced moments earlier. Yet, her thoughts were far from the present. They drifted back to the journey that had brought her here, to the values instilled in her by her late mother, and to the responsibilities she now carried as a leader. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, words that had become a mantra over the years. You'll face challenges not because you're weak, but because you're strong. Use them to show the world your worth. Evelyn Moore had been a fierce advocate for integrity and resilience, qualities Alexis had embodied every step of her career. Sitting on this jet, Alexis felt a deep sense of gratitude for the foundation her mother had laid. But she also felt the weight of her mother's unspoken expectations. To be the example, to challenge the status quo, and to pave the way for others. The events at the terminal replayed in her mind like a film. The skeptical glances, the dismissive tones, the outright hostility, they were all too familiar. Being underestimated wasn't new to Alexis. It was something she had encountered countless times as a woman, as a black woman, and even as a leader in spaces dominated by people who often didn't look like her. But today's incident wasn't just about personal disrespect. It was a stark reminder of the broader challenges that still plagued society. Prejudice and assumptions had the power to undermine progress, stifle talent, and erode the very principles of fairness and inclusion. Alexis knew this better than most. She had experienced it, fought against it, and risen above it. Her thoughts turned to Hendrik. She hadn't enjoyed firing him, but she also felt no regret. His actions had left her no choice. Leadership, she believed, wasn't just about managing success. It was about holding people accountable, even when it was uncomfortable. Allowing Hendrik's behavior to go unchecked would have sent a dangerous message to her organization, a message that prejudice, even when subtle, could be tolerated. Alexis opened the small leather-bound journal she carried everywhere. Its pages were filled with her thoughts, sketches, and reflections from years of navigating challenges as a CEO. Flipping to a blank page, she began writing. Today was a reminder of why leadership matters. It's not about titles or power. It's about responsibility. Responsibility to stand up for what's right, to create a culture where respect is non-negotiable, and to lead by example. She paused, tapping the pen lightly against the paper. For Alexis, the fight against prejudice wasn't just a professional obligation. It was personal. It was about ensuring that no one else in her organization or in her sphere of influence would ever feel the way she had felt in that terminal, judged, dismissed, and disrespected. Looking back out the window, Alexis felt a renewed sense of purpose. The responsibility of leadership was heavy, but it was a weight she was willing to bear. It wasn't just about her success. It was about paving the way for others, challenging outdated mindsets, and fostering a culture of inclusion and respect. The broader implications of today's events weren't lost on her. Prejudice, whether overt or subtle, had far-reaching consequences. It could discourage innovation, alienate talent, and tarnish an organization's reputation. As a leader, Alexis understood the importance of addressing these issues head-on. It wasn't enough to react to incidents. She needed to build systems and cultivate a culture that actively prevented them. Alexis closed her journal and leaned back in her seat. She felt the emotional weight of the day, a mixture of disappointment, frustration, and determination. The journey to change wasn't an easy one, but it was necessary. She resolved to take what had happened today and turn it into an opportunity for growth, not just for herself, but for her team, her organization, and the industry at large. As the jet leveled out at cruising altitude, Alexis looked forward, not just at the literal horizon, but at the metaphorical one as well. The responsibility of leadership was complex, but she knew it was also a privilege. Her mother's words came to her once more, a final reminder. When you face challenges, don't just overcome them, transform them into something extraordinary. With that thought, Alexis closed her eyes, allowing the hum of the engines to lull her into a rare moment of rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today had reminded her why she fought so hard for fairness, for respect, and for a better future. Back at her company headquarters, Alexis Moore wasted no time addressing the systemic issues revealed by the confrontation at the terminal. She knew the incident wasn't just an isolated mistake, it was a symptom of a larger problem. As the CEO of Eclipse Aviation, she had a responsibility to ensure her company reflected the values she had built it on: respect, inclusion, and accountability. Her first step was to call an emergency leadership meeting. Sitting at the head of the sleek conference table, Alexis addressed her senior team with clarity and purpose. What happened at the terminal wasn't just an embarrassment, it was a failure, she began, her voice calm but resolute. This company will not tolerate assumptions, prejudice, or unprofessional behavior at any level. To drive meaningful change, Alexis outlined a series of immediate actions. 1. Mandatory training programs. Every employee, from ground crew to senior leadership, would participate in training focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The goal was to ensure that everyone understood the importance of respect and professionalism in all interactions. 2. Anonymous reporting system. Alexis introduced a platform where employees could safely report instances of bias, harassment, or misconduct without fear of retaliation. She emphasized that addressing these concerns was not just an option, it was a priority. 3. Regular performance reviews. Leadership and staff would undergo evaluations, not only for their job performance, but also for how well they upheld the company's values. As the plans were laid out, the room fell into a contemplative silence. Alexis could see the weight of her words settling over the team. It wasn't just about fixing mistakes, it was about reshaping the company's culture. Her efforts began to resonate almost immediately. Anna, the receptionist who had hesitated to step in during the terminal incident, approached Alexis later that day. Nervously clasping her hands, she admitted, "Ms. Moore, I just wanted to apologize. I saw what was happening, and I didn't speak up. I should have done better." Alexis regarded her with a thoughtful expression. "Anna, it takes courage to acknowledge when we've fallen short," she replied gently. "What matters is what you do next. Use this as an opportunity to grow and to help create the culture we're striving for." Moments of reflection extended beyond the office. Michael, a middle-aged ground crew member, stood up during one of the training sessions. His voice was hesitant at first, but as he spoke, it grew more certain. "I didn't realize how much my assumptions affected the way I treated people," he admitted. "Hearing Anna's story made me think about my own actions. I want to do better." These moments of growth reinforced Alexis's belief in the power of change. It wasn't easy to confront biases, but the willingness of her team to reflect and improve gave her hope. By the end of the month, Eclipse Aviation had not only implemented the new systems, but had also begun fostering a culture of openness and respect. Alexis knew the journey was far from over, but the first steps had been taken. As she looked out of her office window at the bustling city below, Alexis felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. She wasn't just managing a company, she was building a legacy where everyone, regardless of their background, was treated with the dignity and respect they deserved. The incident at the terminal was a turning point, not just for Alexis, but for her entire organization. It proved that while change might start with a single moment, its impact could ripple outward, touching lives and reshaping cultures in ways that truly mattered. Alexis Moore's story is more than just an account of standing up for herself. It's a powerful lesson in resilience, fairness, and the courage to lead by example. Faced with prejudice and assumptions, she didn't waver. Instead, she turned a moment of disrespect into a catalyst for change, not just for herself, but for her entire organization. Her journey reminds us that change begins with small but meaningful steps, whether it's holding others accountable, creating systems to ensure fairness, or simply having the courage to speak up. Alexis didn't just challenge the assumptions placed on her. She used the experience to create a culture where everyone is treated with respect and dignity. This isn't just her story, it's a call to action for all of us. How often do we make assumptions about others? How often do we hesitate to confront injustice, even when we see it happening? Change doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with accountability and the willingness to reflect on our own actions. So what about you? What will you do to challenge prejudice and lead with integrity? Will you stand up for fairness when it matters most? Will you be the leader who inspires others to grow and change? Remember, the world needs more leaders like Alexis, those who have the courage to face challenges and transform them into opportunities for progress. If her story inspired you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that inspire, challenge, and empower. Together, we can create a better, more inclusive world one step at a time.